The Wolf King thought his bloodline ended. Then she called him by his true name. Kaelin, the Wolf King, stood atop the frozen cliffs overlooking the ruins of his once great castle. His black cloak, torn at the edges, fluttered in the bitter wind, and his silver hair shimmered under the dim light of a dying moon. The crown, heavy and cold, rested uneasily on his head, not a symbol of power but of loss. He had believed his bloodline ended. Every heir, every child of his line had been claimed by the curse that haunted their family for generations. Kaelin's heart bore the weight of every death, every mistake, and every betrayal that had led to this lonely throne. The kingdom below, once vibrant and alive, now lay in ruins, its walls crumbling, its streets empty, its people scattered like ash on the wind. For years he had roamed these lands alone, a shadow of the king he once was. Wolves, both beast and spirit, followed him loyally, sensing the sorrow that clung to him like a second skin. They were his only companions, yet even their presence could not ease the ache of a throne without an heir. Kaelin had become a ruler of echoes and memories, a sovereign in a world that had forgotten how to hope. It was on such a night, under the pale light of the moon, that she appeared. Seraphine came from the woods as though the darkness itself had given her form. Her hair flowed like liquid night, and her eyes, a striking shade of violet, seemed to see through the stone walls around Kaelin's heart. She moved with a quiet confidence, unafraid of the wolves that circled cautiously around her. "You are the Wolf King," she said, her voice soft but steady, carrying an authority that surprised him. Kaelin. The name hit him like a blade. No one had called him by his true name in decades, not since the curse began to unravel his lineage. He turned slowly, his piercing eyes scanning her, searching for deception. "How do you know me?" he asked, his voice rough, unused to speaking to anyone who dared step so close. "I know your name," she said simply, "because the blood of your line still flows, hidden, waiting to be remembered, and I am here to call it forth." Kaelin's brow furrowed. "You speak in riddles." "Perhaps," Seraphine admitted, stepping closer. Her presence felt like the warmth of sunlight in a frozen world. "Or perhaps the truth is too simple to believe. You have not lost everything, Kaelin. Not yet." For the first time in years, a spark of something he thought long extinguished flickered in his chest. Suspicion warred with hope, fear with longing. He had been abandoned by destiny, yet here was someone who seemed to challenge the very foundations of his despair. "Why come here?" he asked, the words heavy with unspoken warning. "Why appear now in a kingdom that is nothing but ruin?" Seraphine's gaze did not waver. "Because the curse that haunts you is not absolute. There is a way to reclaim what was lost, but you must first face what you have tried so long to bury." Kaelin's jaw tightened. Every memory, every mistake, and every regret clawed at the edges of his mind. He remembered the last battle for his kingdom, the cries of children and heirs lost to the cruel hand of fate. The weight of guilt threatened to crush him. Yet somehow, in the depth of his despair, he felt a pull toward this mysterious woman. "You speak as if you know me," he said, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "And yet I have walked alone in these lands for so long. How could anyone know the Wolf King?" "Because I have walked in shadows," she said. "And in those shadows I saw what even the wolves cannot see, the truth of your heart. You mourn not just your children, but the man you once were. And you have forgotten that a king is defined not by what he loses, but by what he chooses to protect." Kaelin's eyes darkened. Protection had always been his promise, yet he had failed at it in the most profound way. How could he trust her words or the promise they carried? Still, a part of him longed to believe. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his tone hard, though beneath it lingered a trace of curiosity. "Nothing, yet," she replied. "Only to remind you of who you are. Only to ask if you are willing to see beyond the ruin, beyond the curse, and find what remains. Only then can the bloodline be remembered and perhaps restored." Kaelin felt the wolves shift around him, restless. Even they sensed the change that came with her words. and in that moment he realized that the world was holding its breath. "You speak of restoration," he said slowly, "but what cost will it demand? Every time I have sought to reclaim what was lost, I paid with more blood, more sorrow." Seraphine stepped closer, so near that he could see the faint shimmer of magic in her eyes. "Some prices must be paid," she said, "but some debts are meant to be lifted, not added to. You do not have to carry this alone, Kaelin, not anymore." Her words struck him, resonating deep within his chest. For so long, he had believed himself alone in the shadow of a curse. And yet, here she was, offering a light that felt almost unbearable in its intensity. He wanted to push her away, to retreat into the cold comfort of his solitude, but the truth was undeniable. He was drawn to her. The forest around them seemed to still. The howl of distant wolves softened to a whisper, and the snow glimmered like scattered diamonds under the moonlight. Kaelin could feel the pulse of the land itself, aware that something ancient and long forgotten was awakening. "Tell me," he said finally, the first crack in his armor showing, "who are you? And why do you seek to call me by my true name?" "I am one who remembers," Seraphine said softly, "and I am one who believes that even a king broken by fate can rise again." "Your name, it carries power, Kaelin, power that the curse sought to hide, but it cannot hide forever. Not from me, not from you." Kaelin felt a shiver run down his spine. The words resonated like a drumbeat in his chest, stirring memories of a life he thought had ended long ago. And yet he feared that hope was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the harshness of reality. "Why now?" he asked, almost pleading. "Why come to me after all these years of solitude?" "Because time is fleeting and the shadows grow restless," she replied. "Because the land remembers its king, even if he has forgotten. Because you have not yet faced the truth, and only truth can break the chains of the curse." Kaelin's gaze dropped to the ground. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing upon him, the sorrow of lost heirs, the ache of a throne abandoned by life itself. And yet, in Seraphine's presence, he felt a faint glimmer of possibility, a spark of something that had not existed in his heart for years: hope. A gust of wind swept across the cliffs, lifting her dark hair and carrying the scent of distant pine and snow. Kaelin felt the cold bite at his skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had lived in his soul for decades. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine a world where the curse could be undone, where the bloodline could continue, where he might find not just restoration but redemption. And then, as if drawn by some unseen force, Seraphine spoke his name once more. "Kaelin." The sound of it rolled over him like a wave, ancient and familiar, yet brimming with new life. In that single utterance the air seemed to thrum with unseen energy. The forest paused, the wolves hushed, and even the cold wind seemed to bow in respect. Something long buried had stirred within him, something that had waited for the sound of his true name to awaken. Kaelin's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, though he no longer sought to fight. Instead, he knelt slightly, overwhelmed by the realization that the curse had not claimed everything. That perhaps, in this strange, violet-eyed woman, he had found a guide through the darkness that had held him captive for decades. The night stretched before them, silent yet alive with unseen power. Kaelin's heart, long encased in frost, began to thaw, not fully, but enough to feel the faintest spark of something dangerous and beautiful: hope and perhaps love. Yet the storm of the past still loomed, and he knew that the journey ahead would be perilous. Trust would be tested, secrets would surface, and the ghosts of those lost would demand their reckoning. Kaelin rose slowly, meeting Seraphine's unwavering gaze. "If what you say is true," he murmured, his voice low and rough, "then show me. Show me the way before the night swallows us entirely." Seraphine extended her hand, a bridge between the world of shadows and the promise of dawn. "Then follow me," she said. "And remember, Kaelin, the bloodline is not gone. It waits for the king who dares to claim it." As they stepped forward together into the dark forest, The moonlight glinted off their path, casting long shadows that danced like memories of the past. The wolves trailed silently behind, guardians of a king who had once believed he was alone. And for the first time in decades, Kalen allowed himself to believe that the night might not be eternal, that the curse might yet be broken, and that the Wolf King's legacy could rise again, reborn in fire, snow, and the echo of a name long forgotten. But in the distance, the howl of another wolf, different, more ominous, cut through the still night. Something waited in the darkness, watching, patient, and relentless, and Kalen knew that the path ahead would test every ounce of his strength, heart, and soul. The journey had begun. The forest was alive with whispers. The snow crunched under Kalen's boots as he followed Seraphine through the winding paths, the shadows of tall, ancient trees stretching long and twisted in the moonlight. Even the wolves that padded silently behind seemed unusually alert, sensing that the journey ahead carried more than just physical peril. It was a journey through memory, through grief, and through the very essence of Kalen's haunted soul. Kalen kept his eyes fixed ahead, though every rustle of wind, every shadow that flickered in the trees, tugged at the old fear that had become a constant companion. For years, he had avoided people, avoided connections, avoided hope itself. And yet here he was, drawn by the soft insistence of a woman whose presence seemed both fragile and unyielding. "Why are you helping me?" Kalen asked finally, breaking the silence that had settled between them. His voice carried the weight of distrust and exhaustion. "You don't owe me anything." Seraphine walked beside him, her dark cloak brushing against the snow. "Perhaps not," she said softly, "but I am bound to your family, bound by a promise that stretches back before even you were born. Your bloodline, Kalen, is intertwined with mine. The curse that took your heirs took so much from both of us. I am here because the past is not finished with you yet." Kalen's jaw tightened. He had spent decades haunted by the mistakes of his predecessors, by the blood spilled in battles that were not always his fault, yet for which he carried all the blame. Now, someone claimed that the past could still reach him, not to punish, but to guide. He wanted to recoil, to retreat to the frozen solitude he knew so well, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet intensity, that refused to let him. "You speak of promises," he said, his voice low. "But promises do not undo death. They do not bring back the lost." "No," she admitted, "they do not. But they can light a path through the shadows, and sometimes that path is all we have." The path they followed twisted deeper into the forest, leading them to a clearing that glowed faintly with the pale light of the moon. Here the trees formed a natural circle, and in the center stood an ancient stone altar, half buried under snow and ice. Its surface was etched with runes that seemed to hum faintly, as though alive. "This place," Kalen whispered, awe and suspicion warring in his heart. "I have seen ruins before, but never like this." Seraphine knelt and traced her fingers over the cold stone. "This was a site of old magic," she explained. "The kind that binds fate and blood together. Your ancestors came here to protect their line, to hide their secret. And perhaps to leave a way for the line to survive, even when all seemed lost." Kalen studied her closely. He did not trust magic easily. In his life it had been both a weapon and a curse. Yet there was no denying the pulse of energy that radiated from the altar, a rhythm that seemed to sync with the faint beat of his own heart. "You say the bloodline survives," he said, his voice cautious. "Do you know how? Do you know if it is truly possible?" "I do not know everything," she admitted. "But I know that the key lies not just in magic, but in the choices you make. You cannot reclaim what was lost by force alone. You must confront your own guilt, your own fear. Only then can the path open before you." Kalen exhaled slowly, letting the cold air fill his lungs. His heart ached, remembering the heirs who had perished, the children who had been stolen by fate. The images of their small faces haunted his dreams, and yet Seraphine's presence made it possible, however faintly, to imagine a future where he could rise again. They spent hours at the altar, studying the runes, tracing their patterns and speaking softly of the past. Seraphine shared fragments of her own story. Her family, once loyal to Kaelin's ancestors, had suffered under the same curse that had taken his children. She had wandered the lands, seeking a way to undo what had been done, waiting for the king who had been lost to despair to remember his strength. Kaelin listened, sometimes skeptical, sometimes captivated. The walls he had built around his heart were cracking, tiny fissures that allowed a dangerous, unfamiliar warmth to seep in. He found himself wanting to trust her, though the memory of betrayal and loss cautioned him against it. As the night deepened, the wind carried an unsettling howl from the distance, sending a shiver down Kaelin's spine. The wolves stiffened, growling softly, their instincts warning of danger. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice firm but low. "Something is out there." Seraphine nodded, her hand brushing against his sleeve in a gesture that was both grounding and electric. Together, they moved cautiously toward the edge of the clearing, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows deeper. A sudden rustle of branches, sharp and deliberate, broke the silence. Kaelin's hand went instinctively to his sword, the metal hilt cold against his palm. The wolves circled, eyes glowing in the dark. From the shadows, figures emerged, not entirely human, not entirely wolf, but something in between. Their eyes glimmered with hunger and old resentment, a reflection of the ancient curse that lingered over the land. Kaelin's chest tightened, but he did not falter. "Stay behind me," he said to Seraphine, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. The creatures advanced, their steps silent, their presence suffocating. Seraphine stepped forward, her voice calm and commanding. "They are not your enemies," she said. "They are remnants of the past, echoes of the curse. You must face them, Kaelin, not with force alone, but with the truth of your heart." Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "And what truth is that?" "That you are more than the mistakes you have made," she said. "That you are the Wolf King, even in the shadow of loss. That you can choose to rise, even when the world believes you are fallen." He exhaled, focusing on the creatures before him. They seemed to hesitate, sensing the shift in him, the subtle change in his aura. He remembered Seraphine's words, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to act with clarity rather than rage. He spoke their names aloud, not in anger, not in fear, but in recognition of their existence, their pain, and their connection to the curse. The creatures paused, their snarls quieting, and one by one they dissipated into the shadows, leaving behind a silence that was almost sacred. Kaelin lowered his sword, his chest heaving. Seraphine's hand found his, her fingers warm against his cold skin. "You see," she whispered, "even in the darkness there is a path, even in the curse there is a chance for redemption." Kaelin looked at her, gratitude and something deeper flickering in his gaze. "I do not know if I am ready," he admitted, "but I am willing to try." Seraphine smiled, a small, radiant thing in the pale moonlight. "That is all the world asks of you. One step at a time, Kaelin, one step at a time." They made camp in the clearing, building a small fire that crackled against the cold. The warmth was comforting, but it did not erase the weight of the past. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the soft wind and the occasional howl of a distant wolf. "You have been alone for so long," Seraphine said gently, "and yet here you are, willing to walk beside me. That is courage, Kaelin, true courage." He did not answer immediately. His thoughts were a storm of memories, regrets, and cautious hope. Finally he spoke, his voice low but firm. "I have walked in shadows for decades. I have believed that nothing could redeem me. And yet, your presence makes me wonder if I was wrong. Perhaps redemption is possible, even for someone like me." Seraphine reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "It is always possible, Kaelin. Even in the deepest night, dawn waits. Even in the harshest winter, life persists." The night wore on and the fire dwindled, leaving them surrounded by darkness. Yet for the first time in years, Kaelin felt a spark of something he thought lost forever: hope. and beside him, Seraphine remained, a steady presence, guiding him through the shadows that had long consumed his heart. But as they drifted into an uneasy sleep, a distant howl pierced the night, different from the others, deeper and more threatening. It was a reminder that the past was never truly gone, that danger still lurked, patient and relentless. Kalen's hand instinctively went to his sword once more, the weight of responsibility settling on him like a second crown. The journey was far from over. The curse still lingered, the land still mourned, and the shadows of the past still reached for him. And yet for the first time, Kalen did not face them alone. He had Seraphine, and together they would walk the path through darkness, toward a destiny that neither of them could yet fully see. The forest waited, silent and watchful, as the wolves curled around them. And in the distance, beyond the reach of the firelight, eyes gleamed, an omen of challenges yet to come. The shadows of the past were not finished with the Wolf King. The sun had not yet risen when Kalen and Seraphine reached the ruined city at the heart of the kingdom. The streets were jagged with broken stones, and shadows clung to every wall as though reluctant to let go. Once, this place had thrived, filled with laughter, music, and light. Now it whispered only of sorrow and memory. Kalen's boots crunched on the frost-covered cobblestones, each step echoing in the silence. Seraphine moved beside him, quiet and confident, her eyes scanning the ruins for signs of the old magic that had survived the years of decay. "Kalen," she said softly, breaking the silence, "we are close. The mirror of blood waits in the palace. It is ancient and it does not lie. It will show you what you need to see, but only if you are brave enough to face it." Kalen gritted his teeth. "I have faced death, war, and betrayal. I do not know if I am ready to face myself." "You do not have a choice," she replied, her tone gentle but firm. "The curse cannot be undone without truth. The past, your failures, your fears, they are part of what you must confront. Only then can you claim what remains of your bloodline." The palace rose before them like a skeleton of memory. Its towers were shattered, windows dark, and walls cracked. But in the center, where the throne had once stood, a faint glow emanated. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Kalen could feel it through the soles of his boots, a reminder that some power, some magic, remained even in ruin. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder. The walls were lined with shattered mirrors, their surfaces fractured but still reflecting fragments of the world. Kalen's reflection multiplied endlessly, 1,000 versions of him staring back with sorrow, regret, and defiance. "The mirror of blood is not one mirror," Seraphine explained, her voice almost a whisper. "It is many. Each reflects a truth, each holds a memory. You will see what you must, and you will understand what you cannot ignore." Kalen's gaze fell on one mirror that glowed faintly red, pulsing with an inner light. He approached cautiously, the echoes of his boots mingling with the low hum of magic. "Step forward," Seraphine urged. "Do not fear it." Kalen took a deep breath and stepped closer. The mirror shimmered and then solidified into a clear image, not just a reflection, but a vision of his past. He saw his ancestors, proud and regal, fighting battles to protect their line. He saw himself as a young king, ambitious and strong, yet unaware of the shadows that would come. And then he saw the moment that had haunted him for decades, the deaths of his children, one after another, stolen by the curse that seemed impossible to break. Pain clenched his heart, but he did not look away. Seraphine's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, a silent support that reminded him he did not have to bear it alone. "You are not your failures," she whispered. "You are the sum of all you have lived. And you still have the power to change the path ahead." Kalen's reflection shifted, showing another scene, this one darker, more frightening. It was not only his mistakes, but his anger, his pride, his fear that had fueled the curse, that had allowed the shadow to grow. And within the shadow, he saw something that made his chest tighten, the face of a figure long thought dead, eyes glinting with hatred and purpose. "This is the true test," Seraphine said quietly. You must face not only what you regret but what you fear. Only then can the bloodline survive. Kaelin's hands tightened on the hilt of his sword, though he knew he did not need it here. This was not a battle of strength, but of spirit. He swallowed hard, the weight of centuries pressing on him, and stepped closer to the glowing mirror. The vision shifted again, showing him moments with Seraphine, moments that had not yet happened but felt inevitable. They were standing together, side by side, facing danger, trusting each other, relying on one another. He saw the trust in her eyes, the hope in hers, and the possibility of a future that did not end in loss. Kaelin's throat tightened. "Do you truly believe the bloodline can live?" he asked, his voice rough, almost broken. "I do," Seraphine said firmly. "But only if you embrace who you are, the Wolf King, flawed but unbroken. Only if you are willing to forgive yourself and to trust in what we can do together." He exhaled slowly, letting her words sink in. The anger, the grief, the endless guilt, they were all part of him, but they did not have to define him. He could rise beyond them, as the king, as the man, as the guardian of a legacy that refused to vanish. The mirrors shimmered again, and Kaelin saw the face of the shadowed figure more clearly. It was a man, tall and imposing, his eyes glinting with malice. Kaelin's heart clenched, recognizing him as the enemy who had orchestrated much of the kingdom's downfall, a former ally turned traitor, thought lost in battle but returned to claim vengeance. Seraphine's hand tightened on his arm. "This is the one you must face. The one who will test your resolve, but you will not face him alone." Kaelin nodded, steeling himself. "Then let him come," he said, his voice low and steady. "I have walked through shadows before, and I will not fall now." The air around them shimmered as the magic of the mirror of blood surged. Kaelin felt a strange pull, a connection to every king and queen who had walked these halls before him. Their strength, their courage, their mistakes, they all flowed into him, filling him with both power and responsibility. Suddenly, a chill swept through the palace. The shattered mirrors rattled, and the shadow of the figure from the visions appeared, stepping through the ruins with silent menace. Kaelin drew his sword, the metal humming with energy drawn from the mirror. "You are alive," the figure said, his voice cold and echoing. "I thought the Wolf King was finished." "I am not finished," Kaelin replied, his eyes blazing. "I am more than you can imagine." Seraphine moved beside him, her presence steadying him. "Remember what you have learned," she whispered. "Your strength is not only in the sword, it is in your heart, your choices, and your truth." The shadowed figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the empty halls. "We shall see," he said, stepping closer. "You are still weak, still bound by regret and fear. And I will finish what I began." Kaelin tightened his grip on the sword. He could feel the magic from the mirror coursing through him, linking him to the past and the future, to the ancestors who had fought for this kingdom, and to Seraphine, who had never wavered in her belief. "You will not win," Kaelin said, his voice firm. "Not while I still draw breath, not while the bloodline lives, even if it lives through me alone." The shadow lunged, and the battle began, not only with steel but with will, with magic, and with the strength of truth. Kaelin moved with precision and purpose, each strike fueled by the lessons he had learned, the grief he had endured, and the hope that now burned within him. Seraphine supported him, her own magic flaring to protect and guide him, a beacon in the darkness. Hours seemed to pass in moments. The echoes of the past and the pulse of the mirror intertwined with the present, creating a battle that was as much internal as external. Kaelin faced not only the shadowed figure but the parts of himself he had tried to bury: fear, guilt, rage, and doubt. And through it all, he held on to Seraphine's hand when he could, drawing strength from her unwavering belief in him. Her presence reminded him that he was not alone, that redemption was possible, and that even in the deepest darkness, light could find a way through. Finally, as the first rays of dawn touched the broken towers of the palace, Kaelin stood victorious. The shadowed figure, weakened by the truth of Kaelin's strength and the light of his heart, retreated into the ruins, leaving only a promise of return. Kaelin sank to his knees, exhausted but unbroken. Seraphine knelt beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You faced the past, you embraced the truth, and you claimed the power that is yours by birthright. The bloodline is not lost, Kaelin, it lives." Kaelin's chest heaved as he looked at her, gratitude and something deeper burning in his eyes. "I could not have done this alone," he admitted. You reminded me of who I am and of what I can be." Seraphine smiled, a soft, radiant light in the early morning. "We are stronger together, and this is only the beginning." Kaelin nodded, rising slowly. The palace, though in ruins, seemed alive with possibility. The mirror of blood had shown him the path. Not easy, not without struggle, but real and achievable. Yet even as they prepared to leave the palace, the wind carried a distant sound, a low, haunting howl that promised that their trials were far from over. The shadows would return, testing their courage and their bond. But Kaelin felt a spark of confidence he had not known in decades. With Seraphine by his side, he could face whatever darkness remained. The Wolf King had remembered his strength, and the journey toward redemption and the reclaiming of his bloodline had only just begun. The forest beyond the city awaited, full of unknown dangers and ancient magic, but also full of hope. And together, Kaelin and Seraphine would walk its paths, facing the past and shaping the future, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. The dawn was not just light, it was a promise. And in that promise, the Wolf King found the courage to rise. The wind carried a bitter chill as Kaelin and Seraphine moved through the frozen plains that stretched beyond the ruined city. The echoes of the past lingered in the air, whispers of lost heirs, fallen warriors, and broken dreams. But Kaelin's steps were steadier now. He was no longer the haunted king who wandered alone. He was a man strengthened by truth, guided by hope, and tethered to a purpose larger than himself. "The final trial awaits," Seraphine said softly, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. "Beyond the black hollow lies the heart of the curse. There, the shadow that has plagued your bloodline will test you, Kaelin, and only by facing it together can we break it." Kaelin nodded, gripping the hilt of his sword. His reflection in the ice briefly caught his eye, strong, determined, yet marked by years of grief and sacrifice. "I am ready," he said. "If the curse wants to claim me, it will have to face all that I am and all that we are." The wolves padded silently beside them, their presence a reminder of loyalty and unbroken connection. The land itself seemed to watch them, as if aware that something momentous was about to unfold. As they approached the Black Hollow, a vast chasm that split the frozen plains, the air thickened with dark magic. Shadows moved unnaturally, curling and twisting as though alive. Kaelin's heart tightened, but he did not falter. "Stay close," he said to Seraphine. "The curse senses fear. We cannot show it weakness." She nodded, taking his hand briefly, a touch that sparked warmth through the cold, a silent vow that they would face the darkness together. The hollow yawned before them, a deep black void that seemed to swallow light. From its depths rose the shadowed figure they had seen in the mirror of blood, taller and more menacing than before. His eyes glowed like molten silver, and his voice rumbled across the frozen plains. "You dare return, Wolf King," the figure hissed. "You think you can undo what has already been done?" Kaelin stepped forward, sword in hand, though he knew the battle was more than physical. "I have walked through every shadow of my past," he said, his voice steady. "I have faced my failures, my guilt, and my fear. And I will not let the curse take what remains of my bloodline." The shadow laughed, a sound that chilled the air. "You are strong, yet still chained by your own weakness. You cannot save what is already lost." "Perhaps," Kaelin admitted, "but strength is not only in the body. It is in the heart, in the choices we make, and in the courage to rise despite everything. And I choose to rise." Seraphine stepped beside him, her own magic shimmering like liquid light around her hands. "We face this together," she said. "Not just as king and ally, but as partners. Your legacy will not end here." The shadow surged forward and the battle began. It was not a simple clash of swords. It was a storm of magic, memory, and emotion. Kalen moved with purpose, each strike of his blade fueled by the lessons of the Mirror of Blood. Seraphine's magic flared around him, shielding, guiding, and amplifying his strength. The shadow twisted and shifted, conjuring visions of the past, lost children, ruined halls, cries of despair. Kalen's heart ached, but he held steady, remembering Seraphine's words. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the resolve to move forward despite it. "Do not falter," she shouted, pushing him away from a sudden lunge. "Your strength is in your truth, Kalen." He drew a deep breath, centering himself. With each step, he called the names of his ancestors aloud, the bloodline echoing through the cold air. The magic of the hollow reacted, thrumming in resonance with his voice. The shadow faltered, confused by the unity of past and present, of king and ally. You cannot," the figure growled, its form flickering. "The curse is eternal," Kalen shook his head. "The curse is only eternal for those who accept it. I refuse." The shadow shrieked and surged again, more powerful and desperate. But Kalen did not fight it alone. Seraphine's hand found his, and together they focused their energy, merging sword and magic, heart and will. The hollow shuddered, ice cracking beneath the pressure of their combined force. In that moment, Kalen understood the final truth. The curse had survived because he had carried his guilt like a chain. The shadow fed on his regret, growing stronger with every unspoken fear. And now, by acknowledging his pain, embracing his past, and trusting Seraphine, he had turned the power of the curse back upon itself. The shadow screamed, a sound that shook the plains and then shattered into fragments of light and smoke, dissipating into the air. The hollow fell silent, the darkness receding like a tide withdrawn. The frozen plains seemed to exhale as though relieved of a centuries-old weight. Kalen sank to his knees, exhausted but unbroken. Seraphine knelt beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You faced the curse and you reclaimed what was yours. The bloodline lives." Kalen's chest heaved. For the first time in decades, he felt free, not unscarred, but unburdened. "We did it," he said softly, turning to her. "I could not have faced it alone." Seraphine smiled, a gentle radiance that cut through the frost. "You have the strength, Kalen, but even the strongest hearts need a guide." They rose together, and Kalen looked across the plains. The land, scarred and frozen, seemed to breathe again. Wolves emerged from the shadows, circling them with quiet reverence. The kingdom had not yet fully healed, but the first step toward restoration had been taken. As they walked back toward the ruined city, Kalen felt a lightness he had not known since youth. Memories of lost heirs and fallen friends lingered, but they no longer crushed him. Instead, they became a part of the legacy he would protect, a reminder of the cost and the reward of courage and love. "Kalen," Seraphine said, breaking the silence, "the bloodline is safe, but our work is not done. The kingdom must be rebuilt, not just in stone and magic, but in trust and hope. And you will lead it." He nodded, the weight of the crown no longer a burden but a responsibility he could embrace. "I will," he said. "Not as the king I once was, but as the king I am meant to be, stronger, wiser, and no longer alone." Their journey back through the forests and ruins was quiet, filled with unspoken understanding. Each step was a promise to the past, a commitment to the present, and a hope for the future. The wolves followed, guardians of the king and the legacy he now carried. When they reached the cliffs overlooking the ruined castle, Kalen paused. The dawn had painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in decades, the castle seemed alive, not in grandeur but in possibility. "Look," Seraphine said, her voice soft, "even in ruin life persists. Even in loss hope survives." Kalen reached for her hand, holding it with care. "Then let us begin," he said, "together." She smiled, and for the first time, Kalen allowed himself to imagine a future where the bloodline would thrive, where the kingdom could rise from ashes, and where love and courage could coexist. The wolves howled in unison, a song of victory and promise. The mountains, the forests, and the plains seemed to echo their sound, carrying it across the kingdom. It was a new beginning, not just for Kalen, but for all who would inherit the legacy he had reclaimed. And yet, even as hope filled the air, Kalen's eyes scanned the horizon. In the distance, the faint glimmer of shadows hinted that the world still held challenges, tests of courage and heart. But he no longer feared them. He had faced the past. He had reclaimed his power. And he had found someone who walked beside him, unwavering and true. The Wolf King raised his head to the rising sun, feeling its warmth for the first time in years. The curse had been broken, the bloodline saved, and the heart of a king restored. Seraphine's hand rested lightly on his, a reminder that he would never walk alone again. Together, they would rebuild, protect, and nurture the legacy that had once teetered on the edge of oblivion. The world was not perfect, but it was alive. And for Kalen, for the Wolf King who had thought his bloodline ended, that was more than enough. The howl of wolves echoed across the plains one final time, not of sorrow, but of triumph, unity, and the promise of a future forged from courage, love, and unwavering resolve. The dawn was not just light, it was the birth of a new era. And in that new era, Kalen, the Wolf King, would rise, not alone, but with the one who had called him by his true name.